Alright guys, so first step of assembly, we just laid out the base frame, and I also laid out the nuts, bolts, and washers that are going to go along with each section of this. Now with the base frame, it also includes a base plate right here that you put your feet on for some seated cable rows, and I'll show that once we get the cable attachments on there, and I'll demonstrate how that works. They also have the T-bar attachment. Now obviously we'll have that secured down so it's not wobbling around everywhere. And then on this back corner over here is a storage for a barbell. So if you wanted to add a barbell to your arsenal and do some regular barbell squats or barbell rows or anything like that, as well as the barbell you're going to use for the T-bar, you can always store it right back here. Now they make this really convenient because all the nuts and bolts are the same size. So as far as like the millimeter you're going to use for a wrench. Now the bolt head is going to be the 14 millimeter and the nut itself is going to be 17. Now they include two wrenches and they both have the 14 millimeter and the 17 millimeter on each end. But I'm just going to use my own socket set just to kind of like speed up the process just a little bit. But if you don't have a socket set, they have two wrenches that you can tighten everything down with. So we're just going to go ahead and get after it with the socket set to kind of speed it up a little bit. And yeah, just follow along. When you're putting the bolts into the frame like this, and it says in the instructions as well, just so you're not confused or anything, just make sure that whenever you put the bolt in, you do have a washer on this side as well as the back side. And then put the nut on there to finish it off. So you definitely want to have a washer on both sides of the actual frame itself. And then you can start tightening it down. Now, whenever we're putting this together initially, you don't want to secure everything like super tight or anything, just to make sure that everything is going to fit properly. So just kind of leave it a little bit looser than you would if you were just like tightening it down to make sure it's fully secure. And until you get everything where you need it, and then you can go ahead and go back and tighten down all of those. Another pro tip, if you're in a shadowed area or where it's just not very well lit, you can always use a headlamp and you can see everything that you're doing. Alright, moving on to the foot plates for the seated cable rows as well as the T-bar attachment. Now this is going to be a little bit different than the back bolts over here because these are going to be going from the bottom up. You want to make sure you go from the bottom up because you don't want the nut on the bottom of it because it's going to be too thick at the bottom and it's going to want to hit the ground. So you want that head, the thin part of the bolt, to be underneath. So what we're going to do is just lift this frame up like this. It's super light, so really easy to pick up and really easy to handle while you're tightening things down. So we're going to pick it up and start tightening down the bolts. And with these, you can go ahead and just tighten them down all the way because there's nothing else that's going to be attached to this. So you can just tighten both the bolts down all the way as good as you can, make it nice and snug. Alright, so another quick tip before we pick this side of it up with the T-bar attachment, whenever you have the bolts put in there and just kind of just hand tight, before you pick it up, make sure you put this thing down. That way when you pick it up, it doesn't like smash your hands from falling down onto the frame. Alright, now we're getting into more of the fun stuff, the upright portions of the rack. Now before you put this into place, I went ahead and just put the screws in from the bottom. That way you can basically just put the screw in with the washer, and once you get both those in there, you can just set this right on top, add the washer, add the nuts, and then finger tighten it down. Now if you don't have a second person to help you out with this, I have this box behind me. You can use pretty much anything to kind of prop this up, that way you can get underneath to tighten everything down. But you can't really like pick it up like we did with the other pieces, just because this is pretty long. You wind up like hitting your ceiling if you have lower ceilings. And the weight of this bar is going to wind up bending your threads on the bolts whenever it's hanging down. So you don't want to tip this over. You want to just kind of prop it up just to where you can get underneath there and tighten everything down. So we have some more upright portions of the rack for the back side of it. Now this one is going to have two different sides from the top and the bottom. So one side is going to be slanted just a little bit because this part of the frame is going to be actually tilted forward just a little bit. And an easy way to figure out which side is which, if you can't really tell the slant, is these two holes right up here at the top. Those will be at the top. So just make sure that, see how it's kind of like slanted this way for me? Basically just going to set this down right here. And I've already got the bolts and the washers and everything in there, so I can just set this on top. And once you get that in there, go ahead and finger tight the nuts down. All right, so all I did, once I got both posts up there and got all the nuts finger tight down, I just put the back of the frame on top of this box. That way I was able to tighten everything down to get up underneath the rack to finish off tightening everything down. So now the next step, we're going to add some more upright portions to the front part right here. And this is going to be a different color. It's going to be red, which is my favorite color. So I can't wait to put this on and actually add some color to this whole system. To get these front uprights up, we got to put these plates on first. So I went ahead and put one screw in there just to kind of hold it in place. But we're going to put the bottom screws into these plates real quick, fasten them down pretty snug, and then we're going to put the upright right into the middle of it and put the other 4 screws in. Alright, so since the plates are in place now, we're going to put the tall piece of the rack right into the front part where these 4 holes are and put the last 2 bolts in and secure it down. Alright, so we've got these 2 parts of the frame put up. The next thing you're going to do is put this together. These are going to come in 2 separate pieces. All you have to do is just pull this bolt out right here, slide this in, put the bolt in, and then you have it connected. And all you do to put this on here, you just go over the top. That's why I got this step ladder, because I'm short. And just bring it over to the top, push it down. Now what you need to do is just make sure this is unscrewed a pretty good bit of the way so that inner peg in there doesn't grind down on this. And this is basically just to, you can pull it out and it secures it into the level that you need whenever you're doing your cable flies. So just make sure that it's unscrewed a good bit, and whenever you're pushing it down, just pull that button out. That way it'll slide nice and easy. All right, next we got the top portion of the rack that's going to go across all 3 portions of the uprights of this rack. So the short end is going to go to the front, the long end with the most space is going to go on the back, and this is going to take 4 screws or 4 bolts to secure it down, and then we'll get to the front part and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Alright, so up next is the pull-up bar. We're going to install this to the top front of the rack. Now obviously this will go in between the two posts right here, and so this plate will be right on the inside. Now this red plate is going to go on the outside of the rack, and upside down, just like this, and kind of sandwich it between the two posts. And then of course we'll put the bolts in and fasten it down, and we should be able to start tightening things down. There might be a couple other things that we'll need to do before we do all that, but we're getting pretty close to the finished product. To make this a little bit easier, what I went ahead and did was put a bolt in the top of each side just so it'll secure it in place. And it's kind of like hanging around, but it's not going anywhere. And that'll keep everything secure so I can put all the rest of the bolts in there and tighten them down. Alright, next we have some more bracing that we're going to install, and these are going to go on the back side, just the pieces with the big holes in it. So these are just going to go right in between the rack itself, right up here and right up here. Same kind of bolts, nuts, washers and everything as everything else. After we get done with that, we're going to install some more bracing with some pulleys up here, and these are going to go right up top on the inside of these two posts right here. So once we get all that put together, we'll move on to the next thing. Next, we have these side braces that are going to go right up top. Now, when we install these, make sure that the pulleys are to the front and up, and these tubes that are going to have some rods connecting all the way down to the ground are going towards the bottom.